welcome to everybody. We've got, is that Nisha? I'm gonna
Correct.
unmute.
Yeah, and everyone coming in, you are muted upon entry, but you are able to unmute yourself. Rob, man.
Dagman. Hi, Mindy. Is that Williams here? We'll just kind of let everybody get settled for a sec. But first of all, welcome everybody. I'm Mark Titus. I'm a fellow filmmaker with Jesse and Shane, and just want to welcome you all this evening. Thanks for joining us on Streamside Chats here. We started putting these together kind of right at the start of the whole pandemic cloistering of ourselves, and really wanted to find some way to kind of reach out and be of service and help tell stories during this time we're all in our homes. And it's just been such a thrill and an honor to have these amazing artists join us weekly, share your art with us, and share your passion with us about wild places and saving them. And I, for one, just want to say, thank you guys for sharing this film with us. It was beautiful. It was beautifully shot. It's heart-wrenching. It's got all the elements of beautiful filmmaking that, keep us coming back for more. And I think what we'll do here is, Tyler, do you got any more housekeeping thoughts on being in the Zoom room here?
Yeah, it looks like it's a pretty intimate gathering at the moment, so I'm not too worried about anything getting very hectic. But as you all have noticed,
Welcome, Bob Dursa.
You're muted upon entry, but we all are here to talk to each other, ask each other questions. So feel free to unmute yourselves and chime in. Or you can obviously use the chat too to make a comment. And, oh, look at that. Hello. Oh, hey, Laura, what's up? There we go. We got comments.
Cool.
So it looks like we all know what we're doing here, so
kind of.
My job is done.
Yeah. So, and P.S. Tyler is our campaign manager for the Wild film. We're about to launch on a virtual tour across the U.S. here, and putting that whole thing together. So this is it's kind of getting to be normal life now, being on these Zoom things. But listen, the way we were going to do this is I was just going to ask a few questions of Shane and of Jesse, and then open it up to you guys. You can always ask a question in the chat bar. I think you can raise your hand. Are we in the right meeting? Can we raise hands in this one? I don't remember. Yeah, you can. You can raise a hand, or you can, type a question in the chat bar. But to start us out, just kind of wanted to go back to the roots, Shane, with you, and how did you come into your dual love of anadromous fish and filmmaking? What was the impetus for you to kind of stumble into these waters?
So the impetus was after I lost my ski career as a professional skier, and I got injured, and the steelhead trout kind of became my got me out of my funk and depression for losing my career. And then I found out they were in trouble and wanted to save them. And then the fish led to rivers, and that led to forests and whole ecosystems and dams and it all. So it's a cascading effect.
They're weirdly connected, those creatures. And they seem, as Amy Gulick likes to say, wild salmon bring good people together. And certainly in my case too, help me see a bigger world. Jesse, how did you and Shane team up on this project? How did you guys come together?
Yeah, so just about 2 years ago now, I was getting pretty heavily invested in starting to do some writing and storytelling about clear-cut forestry and short rotation stuff here in Oregon. I'm based in Portland, just for reference. And so rather than starting from scratch and trying to make, the Oregon forestry expose movie, I thought, well, I should look at the landscape, see what's out there, see who's made the best movie on clear cutting practices in Oregon that I can find. And at the time, that was, and still is, I think, Behind the Emerald Curtain, which is one of Shane's movies. And watched that, got immersed, started to learn so much more. And then as soon as as soon as we started talking and getting a little more connected with subject matter and learning more, you know, when this whole dam thing came up, such a big part of it is how connected the whole flooding situation was to forestry practices in Washington. And so it was kind of like ding, 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 you know, that light went off in my head, and I was like, okay, this is actually the stuff I was working on, but it's in action. It's like, here are the real effects of those forestry practices on communities really visibly. So not to mention a proposed dam that kind of also piqued my curiosity as well. So.
Totally. So you literally merged streams here on fascinations and projects that were kind of in the works.
That's right. Push those tributaries together, and now Shane and I have done several short films in addition to the Chehalis feature as well.
Fantastic. Well, we'll get into that in a sec. Hey Shane, jump back to you. What's your you know, as a fellow storyteller, I've got my own take on this, but what's your favorite part of giving birth to a new project like this? What you know, there's so much that goes into it, the writing and the you know, scoping out of the material and the characters. What do you really get into most of this process?
Entering new worlds for several years and having to become an expert of that particular either topic or region, community. In fact, I just got down here to Klamath Falls, Oregon to start our next 5-year project on the Klamath dam removals, and tomorrow's day one. So literally, I'm just stepping into a new world like 20 minutes ago from Chehalis down to California. So I love immersing myself in the story and the history. I love the history, and you know, I'm a firm believer that those that can't learn from history are condemned to repeat it. So I always like to tie in, you know, some of what's happened in the past and how we can learn from that to forge, you know, to forge a better future. So
I recognize that from Dave Montgomery, who's always wonderful, and his 5th H being history. You know, if we're just like you said, if we don't learn from it, we're doomed to repeat it. So I saw some pretty amazing Instagram posts with you, Jesse, during the course of the work you guys did on this film, and I just got to ask, what's the greatest length you'll go to get that perfect shot?
The greatest length. Let's see. Well, I mean, what comes to mind first is time lapse. You know, I mean, there's not a lot of time lapse in the movie, to be honest. But to me, that's kind of the most painstaking, rewarding type of shot. Because, you know, it really kind of harkens back to the film days where you really can't check it in progress. You have to do the best you can, check the weather, you know, and then the rest is fate, you know. So then you kind of like have to see at the end, you kind of like develop the film and see where you got yourself, and then all sorts of magic that you never saw during the time lapse shows itself to you. So the real answer is staying up all night watching a camera in the parking lot of Timberline Lodge so I can get the Mount Hood shot kind of thing. So
That's really fair, man. That's a good. That's dedication to duty. So kind of for both you guys, you know, and there's lots more. I think we'll open it up to our audience here on this, but where do we go from here with Chehalis? It looks like the comment period just ended yesterday. So what are the next steps for this, and how can people take action, voice their concerns, get involved?
So we just finished the state environmental review process. The federal process with the Army Corps of Engineers is, I think, mid-September is the opening to public comment. So there'll be a whole nother round. And after that is when the Chehalis board goes to the governor and the legislature to really have a recommendation of how to move forward with the flood fish kind of goal they have. However, with the Quinault Nation coming out against it after we wrapped filming, we really wish that could have been in the film, but that was a huge, huge turning point in the conversation because of their treaty rights. And it's the comments, I read the 65 pages of comments they put forth a few weeks ago, and they're really solid. So demanding an alternative to a dam, you know, a more holistic approach that can work toward dual goals. You know, Chehalis tribes opposed it for years. So with both tribes in the basin opposing it, and the environmental community really kind of came together too to form the Chehalis River Alliance to, you know, address these problems and seek out solutions. So I think we'll just have to see what the Chehalis board does from here. And next fall, it's definitely going to pick up again as far as public comment. And then, you know, the governor, I mean, the governor makes the ultimate decision at the end of the day. So, you know, this has been going on since 2007. So, you know, having some closure soon, you know, I think we'll have some kind of an idea of what's going on in this year.
And where's the best place we can send folks now to kind of keep tabs on things? Can we send them to your website, or where should we have folks go?
I would recommend everybody goes to pacificrivers.org. I help run the organization over there and update quite a bit. If you sign up at the organization and put your address in, then we could send you one of our recent newsletters that's got a bunch of Chehalis articles in it too. And I'll be updating there for the next year or two.
Perfect.
For everyone that's on the chat, I just dropped the link in the chat bar too, so you guys can go check it out.
Thanks, Tyler.
Thanks, Tyler.
So lastly for you, Jesse, and then I'm going to get out of the way and shut up. What's next? You guys said you're working on some shorts together. Are you working on the Klamath project as well together?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm not able to join Shane for the first shoot, which is starting tomorrow. But yeah, there's lots of new stuff blossoming. We were just working on a dam removal yesterday, actually up in near Bellingham, near Mount Baker on the Nooksack River. So there's other dam removal things brewing, but the largest project is the Klamath project, which, as Shane mentioned, is going to span the next 5 to 6 years. There is some question as to whether the process, the kind of coalition that's you know in charge of this whole thing, if they're going to decide to push this back a year or not. And Shane, is that due to the water situation down there right now, or?
No, it's actually the federal government's kind of holding the whole process hostage through the FERC process. All the money's there to remove the dams, the corporation's set up, everything's ready to go for January 2022, largest river restoration ever in the world, 4 huge dams. And all everybody's waiting for is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to just sign off on something that every other agency has signed off. So the idea is basically the Trump administration is just holding it hostage for no good reason. You know, we are entering, you know, there's a huge water protest tomorrow. That's why I'm down here. And it's really going to heat up again, this kind of fish farm water use story of the West. However, the reservoirs and the dams and the Klamath don't really provide irrigation water. It's downstream from all the farms. So in theory, removing those dams, the only reason they have to allocate more water right now is because there's toxic algae blooms in the reservoir from the dams that send parasites to the salmon that kill the salmon. So with a free-flowing river and cooler water, in theory, we could actually have less water in the river as long as it's cool and those algae blooms, which would leave more water for the farmers up above. So there's a real, you know, it's one of those situations where it should be a win-win situation for the fish and the farmers, and it's just being held up in this bureaucratic process that's just really frustrating.
Indeed. Well, I'd like to open it up to our audience here, and folks, if you have any questions for Shane or Jesse, raise your hand. Feel free to type them into the chat bar. Tyler can unmute you. You can unmute yourselves, I think. Right, Tyler?
Yep. Yeah. And I already have a question here in the chat. It is from Laura. Laura, just FYI, you're sending me private messages, so everyone else can see them, but I got you here. Can Shane or Jesse contrast the cost of significant restoration of the watershed versus the cost of the dam?
You want me to take this?
Take it, Shane.
Okay, so I mean the dams cut. I mean they're saying it's 628 million, but I can tell you, looking at the cost-benefit analysis, is that's grossly underestimates what it's going to actually cost. It'll be well over $1 billion. And the highest the largest restoration plan in the ASRP is also over $1 billion. So it's two of like the largest probably costs in the state of Washington. Now, what about, I think moving, looking more in depth at other alternatives in lieu of a dam with the restoration, those are the kind of exercises that need to start happening. Because restoration alone can't just solve the flood problem. The other half of the restoration is either moving people or building infrastructure like flood walls or raising houses, any of that. So it's a much more, detailed watershed scale approach than just the silver bullet of stopping water. And I think one of the fundamental problems over since the 2007 flood is the goal for the whole flood reduction side is specifically just to reduce floodwaters at I-5 at the Twin Cities, rather than, how can you build watershed resilience really for the long term? I mean, because this is also a 65-year timeline, all these projections and climate models are based on. Like, what about a 300-year plan, because it's only going to get worse. So how can we build watershed resilience rather than just looking at reducing 1.5 feet of water to take the edge off catastrophic floods? I mean, I think our goals should be a little more dynamic. So, I mean, the amount of restoration you can do for $1 billion is pretty amazing. And, the amount of, properties you could buy out and then put back in the public trust for $1 billion in that area is, I think, well worth taking a harder look at.
Yeah, and of course, like as you guys saw in the film, there's that analysis, of like getting people out of harm's way, just rather than building something 5, 6, 7 times, like in all these storm prone areas across the U.S. and flood prone areas, there's a lot of what you could call stubbornness, and wanting to like hold your turf and continue life the way it's been. But the truth of the matter is those structures were only built a few generations ago. And anyone that's got that generational knowledge of the landscape knows that it ain't worth it. The Chehalis tribe, the Quinault tribe, they can all tell you that. And it's just vastly cheaper to not put stuff in harm's way, essentially, rather than try to stop all the flow, all the water of the biggest storms that climate change can ever bring. So,
I mean, the very first thing that needs to happen here is that, so building in the floodplain, that's like a county decision, right? And kind of the general, FEMA doesn't regulate that. And kind of the general deal across America is as long as you build above the highest previous flood, you can do it. But now we have these climate models that kind of show, we're going to have a 26% increase in flows by 2080. So, we should be adding that buffer of freeboard, that 20% on top of the last previous high flood, to start dictating our land use decisions. I mean, that's the root problem here is people are being allowed all across America to build in hazard areas.
You guys are awesome. Mindy has got a couple of questions stacked up here. So Mindy, do you want to ask them in person here? Can you unmute yourself? Or actually, I can do it for you. There you go.
Okay. I'm sorry, there are 3 completely different questions, but they were coming up. How are you going to distribute your film so it reaches more than the 150 people you just reached, or however many?
It's going to air on KBTC, PBS, June 11th, and they're putting it on the NETA server, so the stations across America will have access. That's one idea. And then I've submitted to a few educational distribution platforms, and we'll probably do some VOD, Amazon Prime, and just kind of see where it goes, so.
Yeah, it'd be great if it was on major networks somehow. That would be fantastic. So good luck.
yeah, and like really quickly too, it's off of YouTube now, right, Shane?
I haven't taken it off yet.
Okay. Well, so yeah, the film was initially actually premiered through YouTube, which is not, of course, what we had planned. Then COVID struck, but that was the first distribution, and that actually we were able to get. I think it's up to 5,000 or 6,000 people now, so that at least that many people have seen it. So, but yeah, PBS regional here, June 11th, and then hopefully national as well. So
Good.
many more. Everywhere,
yeah.
anywhere that will have us.
Two other questions, disparate questions. One of them is, does clear cutting still exist in the valley? I'm sure the erosion issue is somewhat instrumental in the flooding. Is it still an issue or not? And if
Yeah.
it is, what's in the mitigation?
Clear cutting is definitely still happening. I mean, as far as the Chehalis basin goes, you know, in the headwaters is some of the most profitable timberlands in the state of Washington. And of course, Weyerhaeuser owns that. And, you know, this kind of goes back to the timber practices conversation. They're clear cutting all the time. You know, everything's on a 30 or 40-year rotation, and that's just business as usual. They didn't, Weyerhaeuser declined to comment on their dam position for the movie, which is why they weren't in there. But as far as the mitigation, the best mitigation for losing root structure on the hillsides is.
We lost him.
Oh, no.
We lost Jesse.
It's like,
Can you hear me?
Jesus. The best is.
Shane, do you want to finish that thought and then we'll move on to another question?
Yeah, you know, I mean, and it's not, you know, private timber companies are just following the laws that are on the books. They're not breaking the laws up there. So, you know, after the 2007 storm, the hope was that the Department of Natural Resources would enact some stricter regulations on steep slope logging, because that's really the culprit. And it never really materialized. So that's where the pressure needs to be put. It's really hard to prove increases in sheet flow from clear cutting. It's really tough. No one's actually been able to really prove that from the science, but Dave Montgomery and a host of other scientists have proven the landslides are increased significantly from clear cutting. And that's obviously what created a lot of the damage in some of these storms. So.
Thanks, Mindy. Great questions. Nisha, do you want to jump on and ask your question here as well?
Sure. I just was curious because Chehalis is in Lewis County, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So do they have like a land conservation initiative similar to King County where it has to be approved by taxpayers? However, it's an initiative where it goes and buys land and conserves it and buys it from companies like Weyerhaeuser or small farmers on riverbanks to ensure that for future long sustainability and no more, and folks and farmers don't come and destroy the land and kill the fish.
Yeah, I know Lewis County has a conservation district. I've never seen anything that comprehensive. You know, I know, you know, Thurston County's in the watershed and Grace Harbor County as well. And each one of them have conservation districts that do some of that. I know there's some land trusts that work a lot more in Thurston County, and certainly what the Chehalis tribe has been doing a lot of. But I'm not aware of any big land acquisition, like major conservation measures done by Lewis County so far.
Okay, thank you. Maybe just something to share with the people looking at King counties and what they've been doing to ensure that they're doing land conservation, and it happens yearly, and they do a lot of great work, and it's helping our environment.
Excellent. Yeah, King County has some of the most robust floodplain development policies, according to the FEMA gentleman that we interviewed. And Lewis County has some of the weakest floodplain development enforcements. So,
would it be more so because of profit and money and the loggers?
I think that has something to do with it. I think, you know, the whole property tax, I think they really rely on the property tax, and, you know, some of it's just coming up with a creative vision of where to develop your towns and your county. And that needs to be looked at and examined with a tooth comb.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nisha. That's fantastic. Lee, do you want to ask a question there? You had one up in the chat bar. Let's unmute you. There you go.
Hey, yeah, this is Stuart. Just a question, and sorry if this has been answered or discussed in previous Riverside chats. But just generally, and I think Shane, is the next project you're at, you said you're down at the Klamath?
Yeah, we just got down here.
Yep.
Yep.
And so, yeah, totally interested in when you do, did I hear you right that there are dam removal? That's what's going on down there right now for the whole restoration?
It's supposed to in 2022 get going. 4 very large dams, largest in the world ever done.
Yeah, very cool. And then, so my basic question then is, in terms of the power that's currently being generated, how does that factor in terms of what alternatives are thinking of? Like, is wind, solar enough? Is that being what's kind of driving some of that alternative?
That's a good question. I haven't dug too much into that. I know the power was very minimal that was generated.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, it was, Pacificor owns the dams, and essentially it wasn't worth them putting in fish ladders, the cost of that versus what they're getting from the power.
Got it.
I don't know if it's tied into the Bonneville grid. I'm assuming that's probably where the power goes or where the power comes from here, but that's a great question, and I need to follow up on that. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, just curious on how that dynamics. Cool, thanks.
Thank you.
We've got time for a few more questions. If anyone wants, looks like William has raised his hand. Good job on finding that. Go ahead, William, if you want to. Let's see, I can.
Actually, this is Laura, but this is William's computer. Here, I might be able to see. There's my video. As far as the energy, hi there.
Hi.
Situation is concerned, we just put solar on our house a little over a year ago. We have a small house. We're in the shade a lot of the time, and we generate more electricity than we can use, including what it takes to charge our electric car. And that's just on our little house. California has a way higher solar gain and opportunity down there. And when you look at putting solar installations on strip malls, the roofs of strip malls, IKEA's taken this on, where they generate more than they use in their building, and then they sell it to everybody around them. So you look at just strictly photovoltaic, it has huge possibilities, and the cost is plummeting. Now, I realize that solar still is out of the range of a lot of folks, and ours is on a loan too, but the cost benefit is actually pretty high. And so when we're looking at the cost benefit of what these dams cost, what the loss of salmon to a fisheries costs, it's actually a pretty good return on investment, as in for every dollar spent on solar, you gain about $10 back on what you save in dam destruction, various things related to that, as well as all kinds of other infrastructure pieces. So, and that doesn't count wind or geothermal or other alternatives.
Yeah, that's right on the money. I wish everyone could have solar on everything, on car tops, Another thing that kind of like holding up dams and solar. I mean, solar is really kind of like nudging toward that idea of like microgrids, right? So if you don't have to transmit the power on these expensive high voltage lines, those 20 kilowatt lines lose almost, some of them lose 60% of their wattage before they actually reach a distribution center, and then it has to lose additional voltage going to houses and businesses. So I'm all in favor of that. The more we can like reduce the grids and like create like neighborhood grids and share grids, like that. I mean, that's the future for sure.
Yeah, community solar. There's a school here in town that they just built that can't afford to put a solar installation up there, but they've got a great roof system for it. And so now we're trying to look at having folks that could maybe afford to maybe only buy a panel or two, but still getting a chunk of that return. There's lots of ways to do this. I mean, Germany generates more than half of their power from the roofs of their homes right now. And they have a lot of community solar situations. And they generated in January 100% of their energy needs during a week-long period in January. And they're at the same latitude as we are, and they get just as many gray days. And then you look at the whole southwestern part of the United States and how much energy could be generated there. We just have to look outside the box a lot here. Look past the salmon destruction.
Laura is the visionary on our team, by the way, for
Not even
Education
close.
side, as you could tell, the education side of the equation here, and those are amazing stats. I didn't realize that in Germany at all. On that note, though, looking beyond, both Shane and Jesse, I was hoping you guys could maybe help us kind of envision, since you were, in inside of that world there in that region. We're at 30% unemployment right now in this country, and when we talk about restoration and the possibilities that restoration can bring, and then the Civilian Conservation Corps in the 30s, or after the Depression, the Great Depression. Can you kind of maybe based on what you've learned from this project, paint a picture for us if restoration practices were enacted, and what a riparian system could look like if best practices were used, both restoring and then not building, or actually potentially buying out these properties that are in floodplains. You think that's a pipe dream, or is that something that in this time of real change and a very abrupt change for our country, is that something that might be feasible to be even talked about?
Yeah, it's the restoration economy is such a amazing vision, because it will put people back to work in these small communities on their land. It was it really kind of hit me yesterday. Looking at the Nooksack Dam removal, that's a $20 million project, which I didn't think was really that high compared to some of the other dam removals. And, you look at all the construction workers and all the heavy equipment. I mean, it's a big production, and this has been going on for, it's like a $20 million project that's put a lot of people to work for the last decade or 15 years. And then you look down at the Chehalis, where there's been $200 million spent already with this whole design, and not one single restoration project has actually broken ground yet. It's all been like consultants and engineers and no local people. The town of PL, it's boarded. Most of the storefronts are boarded up, and there's a lot of unemployed loggers and heavy equipment operators, and it could really, not just for the Chehalis, but for the whole West Coast. I mean, we got a lot of fixing to do. We did a lot of damage in the last 150 years, and there's a lot of jobs to be had.
Mark, I'm so glad you asked that question. That was one that got missed in the last Q&A. And if anything's going to change the situation, it's going to be driven economically, and the fact that people can still retain the same skills, not have to undergo any new training, if it's heavy machinery or whatnot. And like we say in the movie, they can play an important part in restoring the very watersheds that they grew up working and living in, and give back in that way and make a living. So it's kind of it's a win-win.
I saw when we were filming The Breach, a pretty fantastic restoration project on Prince of Wales Island. Some systems that had absolutely been blown off the map because of the clear cutting through the rivers. And, the people that were doing it were, just like you said, they were all the heavy equipment operators, the loggers themselves, and they loved it. They loved being in that environment and seeing the end result. I wonder too, on the, how far did you guys dig into the cost benefit analysis of, buying out these at-risk properties versus the continual federal merry-go-round of our tax money going to rebuild places that have been flooded out?
Well, we didn't really dive too much into it. I mean, just kind of back of the napkin, in the environmental impact statement, it essentially says that the dam will protect 1,280 structures, which, is 43% of the flooded structures. So I think it's like 3,000 flooded structures in the study area, the dam study area, and the dam will protect 43%. It also says there that 75% of those properties can be kept dry by just raising them and putting more freeboard in. So, I think just getting kind of creative with the numbers and really looking at the whole landscape and figuring the hydrology of it, because that's what's really complicated. And that's why you got to think out of these silver bullet kind of solutions. But I mean, think about, okay, 1,280 structures of value. I mean, I think that's under $1 billion, or they're really high priced structures, and property's pretty cheap up there. So.
And a lot of the structures that you referred to in the EIS, like there wasn't a lot of delineation. Like some of those are like pump houses and like large barns, and just that haven't been used in a long time. So again, there's just a lot of like granular work to be done, you know, like really approaching each property, its relationship to the river, and like what can be done on each one. It takes a lot more legwork, it takes a lot more thinking, a lot more planning, a lot more collaboration, interagency collaborating, and it's much harder. It is harder, but the end result's worth it. So.
Well, and it like you pointed out earlier, I mean, these systems that are in place this is not 1,000 years. This is a couple generations. I mean, it feels to me like it is time to rethink these systems, and it's possible with that kind of collaboration. And on that note, Shane, just to remind me later, I've got some people I want to introduce you to down where you are right now. Some folks that, yeah, I think you'll want to talk to for sure for the film. So we got time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. Anybody else want to raise a hand or put something up in the chat bar? Ann Schaefer, how is it possible that you have nothing to add to this?
Well, Mindy, we did have that last question there that I think we pretty much certainly began to answer about alternate forms of power. And I guess maybe I could add to this question specifically for those counties.
What do you want to ask?
Yeah, was part of your investigation, what was the talk of any other power sources per se for those specific areas?
You talking about Klamath?
Well, maybe Mindy, I'll just let you, if you had to add.
Shift command. Hold on. Can you hear me?
Yep, we got you.
Okay. I was thinking of the Chehalis, but anywhere along the Pacific Northwest, all the way down through California, like Laura was talking about what other alternatives there are. But I think you answered the question. I wasn't asking specifically so much as the Pacific Northwest relies so heavily on hydropower, or at least it likes to say it does. So how realistic is it for solar and geothermal and wind energy to replace it? Or, you know, what are they thinking? But I think you answered it, actually.
I can touch a little bit on something that's not in the movie that's going on in the Chehalis Basin as far as alternative energy. So, and for the record, when they started the dam proposal on the Chehalis, they were looking at hydro. Lewis County PUD did an $80,000 feasibility study. It didn't pencil out for them. Right outside of the town of Centralia, there's, you know, the largest emitter of CO2 in the state, TransAlta coal generation plant, just closed its doors. And there's another dam on the Skookumchuck River that was essentially to power their steam plant and their coal plant. So that's now going to be a deadbeat dam that's blocking one of the most important spring Chinook tributaries because the coal plant went out of business or closed its doors. I don't know why. But behind the coal plant and on the ridge of the Skookumchuck, they're in the process of building a bunch of wind turbines right now. So there is actually renewable energy coming to Lewis County, which I think is a pretty fascinating part of the story.
And with that, I think any last words, Shane or Jesse? I just want to thank you guys so much for entrusting us with your baby and your beautiful storytelling. We are definitely connected in all this. It's just such a thrill to be able to, you know, share each other's work in this way. So thank you so much from us and our team here. Anything else you guys want to add before we close up tonight?
Just thank you again, Mark, for being such a, just a collaborator in distribution and helping get the word out. You know, as much like really facilitating these conversations it's the legwork of the subject matter. You know, you can see a movie and then you can feel moved and then you can walk away and forget about it. So just thanks for hosting this platform and giving people a place to have a forum.
Yeah, I'd like to just echo Jesse and also say thanks to everybody for watching the film and joining for the discussion. I mean, you know, we all part of the same democracy here, and each of our voices matter. And just really appreciate y'all being here tonight.
Thank you guys. We're thrilled, and safe travels, Shane, and we'll be rooting for you here and following you along on the next project here with the Klamath. And for the rest of you folks, if you want to stay in touch with us here at The Wild, you can just send us an email at connect@thewildfilm.com. And we'll get you on the newsletter. We're going to start our virtual tour June 5th. That's a week from Friday. So that's a good way to stay in touch with us. And we'll also connect with Shane and with Jesse and keep you in touch with them too. So thanks again, you guys. Have a wonderful night, and we'll do this again. Take care.
Right.
Thank you all.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.